You are sitting at the dinner table. Someone, your mother, your father, is talking. Not to you, about you. And something shifts in your chest. This quiet internal recalibration. This rapid scan. What does she need right now? What is the wrong answer? What expression do I make so that this doesn't get worse? You don't even know you're doing it. It's already automatic. You're already, at 8 years old, managing someone else's emotional weather like it's your job. Because it was. You grew up reading a room the way other kids read books. Before you said anything, you checked the temperature first. You learned to look at a person's shoulders before their face. You learned that a certain kind of silence meant incoming, and a certain smile meant you were safe for now. You learned to agree, not because you didn't have opinions. You had plenty. You learned that your opinions were not the point. What mattered was keeping things smooth, keeping the peace. You got good grades, so there was nothing to be angry about. You asked for very little, so there was no reason to be disappointed in you. You were helpful. You were easy. You were the kid adults pointed to and said, "She's so mature for her age." And you filed that away as the best thing you could possibly be. And now you are an adult, and the habits followed you. You apologize for things that are not your fault, reflexively, before you've even assessed whether fault applies. You feel a spike of anxiety when someone is upset near you, even if their upset has nothing to do with you. You watch for signs. You calibrate constantly. You have difficulty believing that people like you for who you are, as opposed to what you provide. You keep waiting for the catch. If any of this is landing somewhere you recognize, drop a 1 in the comments. What you're describing has a name. Psychologists call it narcissistic abuse syndrome, a cluster of adaptive responses that develop in children raised by a parent with narcissistic traits. The key word there is adaptive. These were not failures. These were strategies. When a child grows up with a narcissistic parent, the relational dynamic is inverted. In a healthy relationship, the parent attunes to the child, reading their needs, providing safety. In a narcissistic household, this flips. The child learns to attune to the parent. The child becomes the emotional manager. Dr. Craig Malkin, a clinical psychologist at Harvard, describes this as a child learning to outsource their sense of self to someone who can never really give it back. The child doesn't develop a stable internal sense of worth, because worth was always contingent on performance. Children raised in unpredictable emotional environments develop a chronically activated stress response. The brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, learns to stay on. Hypervigilance becomes the baseline, not paranoia, not anxiety in the clinical sense, just never fully off. Always scanning, always ready, always 3 steps ahead of the next emotional shift in the room. This is not a character flaw. This is a nervous system that got extremely good at a job it was assigned too young. Think back to what it felt like to want something. Not a toy, not a birthday. I mean wanting something emotionally. Wanting to be comforted when you were scared. Wanting someone to ask how you were doing and mean it. Wanting to be the one who was held for once, instead of the one doing the holding. Maybe when you cried, the room shifted, and suddenly you were managing their discomfort at your pain instead of having your pain seen. Maybe you learned that needing something created a burden, and you were not willing to be a burden. Not to someone who already seemed so fragile, or so frightening, or so inconsistent. And so you closed the valve. Slowly, over years, you became, by necessity, someone who didn't need much from anyone. Over time, it stopped feeling like a choice. It just became who you were. You may have had a parent who loved you, genuinely, in the way they were capable of. But there was a gap between what you needed and what you were allowed to need. And most women who grew up this way don't call it what it was. They say, "I'm just independent. I'm just not a needy person." Everything you became, the reading of rooms, the management of moods, the extraordinary radar for emotional weather, that was not weakness. That was a child doing what she had to do to stay safe in an environment that required. You were brilliant at it. You still are. But here's the part I want to be honest with you about. The cost, the loneliness of being the most capable person in every room, and never letting anyone see that you are also the most tired. The work is not unlearning who you are. It is learning that the emergency is over, that you are allowed to take up space now, that wanting something does not make you a burden. What you called a flaw was actually fluency, in a language most people never had to learn. Drop an 8 in the comments if this is the first time someone has put words to this for you. What is the earliest memory you have of realizing that your feelings were not the priority? How old were you? Leave it in the comments. Even just the age, even just a single word. If this stayed with you, our next video goes even deeper. The Psychology of Women Who Can't Stop Fixing People. Watch it next.